Welcome to the Sega Lounge, where we celebrate our love for all things Sega, including the games, the music, and the community. I'm your host, KC. Join me as I talk to different guests and learn more about their projects and passion for Sega. Hello everyone, welcome to the Sega Lounge. This is episode 217, and it's a very special one. Hope everyone's doing all right. I'm joined today by good friends of the show, good community, Sega community people, like pillars of the community, you can say. And like they're looking at me like, really? Maybe. No, yeah. Let's go with that. So first up, we have Matt Oliver from Shenmue Dojo. Hello, Matt.
Hello, Casey. Thank you for having me back. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you for coming back. Always a pleasure to have you here. And this time, not really to talk about Shenmue, but it's always a pleasure. Also joining us, Brian Vines from the Dreamcast Junkyard, the Saturn Junkyard, aka the Junkyard Man.
Howdy, the international man of junkyard, of junk.
Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm good. I've been kind of globe hopping a little bit the last few days. Went to Paris, and now I'm visiting family, and then I'm going to go to Seattle tomorrow. So it's all just a whirlwind of. Forgive me if I'm a bit out of sorts throughout this podcast.
Jet lagged.
Mm-hmm. Just like Kiryu and Ichiban might be. Going back and forth.
They do get around, in this game. Well, so thank you, Brian, for joining us as well. It's a pleasure to have you guys here to talk about, you guessed it, Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth. Last season, actually, you've both been here last season to talk about a specific Like a Dragon game. Matt, you came on to talk about Ishin, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And Brian, you joined us for Gaiden. And now we're back together. So you've never been on the same show, I think, on the same episode together, but I think it's fitting that you join me for Infinite Wealth. Before we get into that, though, I thought about something because, Brian's part of the junkyard, the Dreamcast junkyard. You sometimes go on the Dream Pod, and you have a sort of a tradition on the Dream Pod. You start with like a different question every time, something like, I wouldn't say weird, but like, that someone thinks of. And I thought to myself, what's topical? And I think it's the year of Shadow the Hedgehog is topical. Not really Like a Dragon related. But I was thinking to myself, they called it Fearless, Year of Shadow the Hedgehog. So if you had your own year, what adjective would describe your year? So Shadow is fearless, apparently. So Brian, you have an answer. You're looking at me like, I know.
So me personally having my own year?
Year of Brian.
Yeah. Could it be like an animal, like the Lunar New Year? Or is it just an adjective?
I think we'll keep it to an adjective.
Well, nevertheless, I mean, I guess bewildered, because it's often the state I find myself in, and so might as well.
Bewildered, Year of Brian.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good one. What about you, Matt?
Being a Shenmue fan, it's got to be patience. Waited long enough for that third game. I think that fits.
Yeah, I get it. Patience, Year of Matt Oliver. Okay, those are some good picks. Yeah. So we'll lead with this. And for everyone listening to us, what would your adjective be to describe your year, your special year? I don't know. Well then, that's out of the way. Like an icebreaker of sorts. Let's get into Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth. We're about 3 months after the release date. So it released it on the 24th of January, if I'm not mistaken. So it's like we're recording this on the 15th of April. So it's like 3 months after. We've had enough time to play the game, probably finish the story, I think. Yeah. People are saying yes. They're nodding yes. Yeah. and to get into the side stuff. So let's start with our general thoughts on the game. So Matt, let's start with you. General thoughts. What were you expecting from this game, first off? And did it disappoint? Did it meet your expectations?
I'd say exceeded my expectations, actually. I played Gaiden prior to this as well, which, if anybody's played that, the ending of that is fantastic, but sets this up really nicely as well. So I came into it off the back of Gaiden, and then started it. It was a couple of weeks after release I played this, because I was sweeping up my backlog, and then this turned up. Oh, I need to give this a good 60, 70 hours worth of time. It's, in terms of the way they updated the game, it certainly made it easier for me to play. I'm not a fan of turn-based games. I never have been. So for me to pick up a turn-based game, it's got to be outstanding. And this absolutely was outstanding. And they've made improvements everywhere across the board in terms of the turn-based mechanics, the side stuff. I went in there thinking it's going to be the biggest Like a Dragon title ever, and I definitely wasn't disappointed. And the story was brilliant from start to finish.
Okay, yeah. Funny that you should say, like, you're not a big turn-based RPG fan, right? So was it? Did you play the previous one? The Yakuza Like a Dragon game?
I did, and it was off the basis of the previous games having good stories behind it. So I thought, do you know what? I'm not going to let a good story go. Let's give this turn-based thing a fair shout. And I tolerated it, I'll be honest with you. But the story was great in Yakuza Like a Dragon. And then I thought, well, I liked the story so much in the previous game, I've got to give this one a go. And actually, I had more fun with the turn-based mechanics this time around with some of the improvements they made. It made it a lot easier to interact with enemies, move around a bit, and have a bit more control with it. And that just felt 1,000 times better. And that certainly made it a much better experience for me, at least.
Okay, yeah. Awesome. What about you, Brian? Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I was expecting going into it, I was honestly a little bit cautiously optimistic that, leading into it, RGG announced and showed off so many ambitious pieces that they just didn't need to include in this game. And we'll get into all the side stuff, but it kind of amounts to games within games within games, and I think at this point, I do have a lot of confidence in them to stick the landing when they've done this in the past. But it just seemed like Infinite Wealth was so far above and beyond the level of ambition that the series had ever seen in a single entry before, that I was a little bit worried that some of it might collapse under its own weight. Now, I ultimately am very happy with just about everything they've included. And then also the things that maybe didn't land as much were easy enough to sidestep or spend less time with, that it didn't necessarily impact the overall experience. But what I found is a game that just completely lets me go off the rails. And I don't know if this is a good or bad way, just, by placating my I don't know, vulnerability for distraction, just that my ADHD brain will let me just, go in every direction to pursue and just dive deep and like hyper focus on Dendoko Island or any of the arcade games or the Sujimon stuff, and or all the side stories, and it's just, it turned into kind of it just made it very difficult for me to get through the actual like narrative in a way that I hadn't quite experienced in previous Yakuza games before. So I think it was maybe overwhelming, and maybe bewildered is probably an apt description for how I found myself at certain points in this. And I was very lucky to have my fiance, who she was very interested in playing through this game as well. And so at a certain point, we splintered our playthroughs. I focused on all of the side crap, and then she and I would play through the main story, more or less. Not streamline it. She still did all the drink links and everything, but it was a good a good balance good to have her there to help like get me through it, because otherwise I'd probably still be playing through it now.
Okay. Yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah. I always get this experience with Yakuza Like a Dragon games, but this was like another level, a whole different level of like side stuff and distractions and getting overwhelmed with content, actually. So I'll say this: I finished the story yesterday.
Oh wow!
So this is there's a pattern here as well. So last time we did one of these shows, I think was for Gaiden. Yeah, obviously for Gaiden, the last game. I had to force myself to finish the story because we had the podcast to record, and so the reason why I tried to schedule this a little bit in advance, this recording with you guys, was because I knew I had to finish the game at some point. And so we scheduled this for today. I knew I have to finish the game by the 15th. So let's do it. And I was able to do it yesterday after much sidestepping to other stuff and getting distracted and diving deep into other stuff. So I really got into a lot of the side stuff here as well. I also had probably two of the busiest months for me were like January, February, really, really busy in terms of work and life stuff. So I had periods of time like 4 to 5 days in a row that I wasn't able to play the game. So there were like I played this in 3 portions. When the game first launched, then I stopped for a little bit, then I played a whole chunk of it again, and then the last couple of weeks perhaps where I really, dive deep into this game. My expectations were a little bit like yours. I think the idea of releasing Gaiden before this was genius, pure genius, because we had Like a Dragon, Yakuza Like a Dragon in 2020, and so almost 4 years, an almost 4-year difference for a game that I really enjoyed, but just like Matt, not being a major turn-based RPG fan, was enjoyable, but wasn't really my cup of tea. But having Gaiden like lure me into Infinite Wealth with the story and what the things that we knew would happen in this game was, I think, a genius move by RGG. Apart from the fact that I really enjoyed Gaiden, but I think it was a genius move, and I was really, really, really excited for Infinite Wealth when it came out. So kudos to the team for doing this, releasing that little like intro, like as a way to lure people into this mainline game the proper way. I wasn't disappointed by, I don't think, anything really. There were some things that weren't as polished perhaps as others, but we'll get into that. But nothing really like, noticeable or, worthy of mentioning like too much. And yeah, just things that were tolerable or like good instead of excellent. Maybe that's a better way to put it. So if you had to give it to grade it like out of 10, what would it be? I know it's not a good question to answer.
10 what?
No, out of 10, like a score.
Oh, just
for
a
the
number.
Game. Yeah, number.
Oh yeah. That's always so hard for me to
always
do.
Hard, right?
I'll let y'all go first.
I can go first. It's okay. I think I'd give it, if we're not doing decimals, I would give it like probably if we're not doing decimals, I don't think it's like a perfect game, but it's as close to perfect as it could have been, I think. So I would probably give it a 10 for that. But if we're doing decimals, like a 9.5 out of 10, perhaps. I don't know. Matt?
I'd give it a 9 straight out. I think it's certainly the best game I've played this year. I know we're only in April, but I think it stands out amongst the releases we've had already. there's some minor quibbles in there, but I think for the overall experience with it, I think it's a 9 would definitely. Yeah, I'd recommend it to anyone. Put it that way.
Yeah, it's always hard for me, or one of the reasons it's hard for me to rate this way is just because so many times, like you kind of assume that's a 10, and then the things it doesn't do as well, or you just ding it down until you get to the number. But a game like this is so ambitious that it didn't have to do half of the things it does. So even if it fails at a lot of them, like they don't necessarily impact the core of the experience. I mean, it's still just as charming as ever. And so, yeah, I'm like, I guess I'd also give it a 9, I suppose, or 8.5. But I loved the game, and I would recommend it to almost anybody. So yeah, I would ignore my score and just play it.
Yeah. Okay, I'm always a little bit more generous than anyone. Yeah, but we'll have time to get into what minor things we didn't really like that much, and all the amazing things that we liked. But overall, major success for RGG, right? That's we can all agree on this. So let's get into the specifics. And we'll try to leave spoilers till the end of this conversation. So for people listening in, feel free to listen along, even if you haven't played the game, if you're interested in the game. And then when we get into the story, which will probably be like one of the last things we'll talk about, we'll have a spoiler warning, and you can leave then and go into the safety of your mother's arms, perhaps. I don't know. Okay, so let's get into specifics. We have a list. We have an outline. We are prepared, sort of, but we can go into this in any order you guys want. I had setting, gameplay mechanics, side stuff, characters, and then story. So maybe we can start with the setting, which I think is important because it's a big change this time. We leave Japan, at least at some point. By the way, did you guys play the demos that were in Gaiden?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Okay.
I only played the gameplay demo, not the story demo.
Okay. I tried both, and I didn't know how the game would start, right? But I assumed what we had played was like closer to the beginning of the game than it actually was. So we'll get into story later. But you actually start in Japan, right? You start in Yokohama, like the previous Yakuza game, Like a Dragon, Yakuza Like a Dragon. But then you move into, go into Japan or into Hawaii, and things change drastically. So thoughts on the setting? Were you satisfied with this? Were you happy that we had a different country, different culture, and how the game adapted this?
I was. I mean, it's a big risk taking it out of sort of, I guess, a comfort zone of Japan, because it's very easy to just sort of default to something like that. But going to Hawaii, A, it's a big risk, it's a foreign country, and B, the map was massive. And when you compare it to Kamurocho, for example, or Yokohama, the map was, dare I say, overwhelming in some respects, because actually when you think, oh, I'm going to the beach or wherever, and you're at the top of the map, you don't realize how far it is. But within that, there's so much to do that it doesn't feel all that far. And like, I get distracted by side quests or get distracted by mini whatever. So it's taking it to Hawaii, I think, was a genius move. I think it needed that as part of I think almost like a refresh. This felt like a line in the sand for the series, in that they wanted to take it to the next level. And by giving it a new location and giving it a storyline set outside of Japan, a bit spoilery, but you get the point. It elevates it for me. And it also allows RGG to take those risks that I don't think they may have done had they kept it within the confines of Kamurocho or Japan as a whole. That's how I think it went anyway.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. What about you, Brian? Did you enjoy Hawaii?
Yeah, I agree completely. I think I talked a little bit about this when we were discussing our thoughts on the demo in the Gaiden episode, but I loved how it just felt so culturally and aesthetically different from the other areas that had been in the series before, and I think it really does capture the vibe of Honolulu and in American cities in general, where it's just there's a lot of space, all the roads have a lot of lanes, there's a grid system. Things feel starkly different from the more dense and intimate settings that we might get, from a Kamurocho or Osaka. So yeah, I kind of loved that they took that risk, and I'm glad that it paid off in the way it does. So, and then of course, adapting the play to kind of give us some options for getting around it, either whether that's with the segues or just a little more generous teleportation mechanics. You didn't necessarily just have to go to taxis to get around. You could literally just pay more and fast travel wherever, or to any taxi stand from wherever you were. So they did a good job adapting the mechanics to fit the vastness of the new environment. But really, I just loved how I don't know. It just felt like a vacation to Hawaii in a way that very few developers, I think, can capture the essence or vibe of the places they aim to depict in a way that RGG is just very talented at doing. And so, yeah, they knocked it out of the park as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, yeah. As a person who has never been to Honolulu, I think so as well. I think they did a good job, but it was a risk, right? It was a risk going from something really well. They could have picked another Japanese city, right? There are so many places in Japan they could have picked, and they went to another country. That's a risk. I also think that. Yeah, sorry.
Oh yeah, and I was also just going to add that I think the benefit of having Gaiden come out a few months prior is that you kind of get that, you scratch that itch. You do have that smaller, familiar experience that does have its own innovations in other ways, but nevertheless, you kind of get the best of both worlds depending on what you're in the mood for.
Yeah, yeah. I think it also served like the. Is it a mechanic? Is it like the whole thing of like the Sujimon? We'll talk about the Sujimon, but the enemies you find. So this is not spoilers because it's how the game works. Like Ichiban looks at enemies like they're in a video game, like he's the hero of a video game. He has his party and he's battling enemies, and all the characters that you fight change into these like weird enemies from a video game, like from a Dragon Quest game or something. And if they had stuck to Japan, there wouldn't be much variety, right? Because and we see that when you're in Yokohama, you see the same kind of enemies from the previous game. And now in Hawaii, you can get this variety of different enemies, and they go crazy with the names and stuff, and the moves and the jobs as well. So it kind of serves the way the game is played as well better than just sticking to Japan. So I'm glad they did that. And it was nice that we had, like Brian said, the options to fast travel or move around quicker. At first, it's a little bit hard to earn money in the game, right? At first. So I used my Segway sparingly, but after a while, it was all I did. The way that I moved around was just Segway all the time. And by the end, just fast traveling, by going to taxi stands, paying a little bit extra, but that was also a good way to move around. And I enjoy that they did that. And you kept the same ways of getting around between cities, because at some point you play in Japan and in Hawaii, and things are like it's the same. So you can use the Segway in both places. You can move from taxi points to others in the same way. It's the fast travel, so it's the same
Yeah.
thing. It gets
And
you're
also,
familiar.
yeah, I mean, and it helps with oh God, I was going to say Yokosuka, but Yokohama. It helps
If
a lot
only,
just
if
because
only.
that in itself. Oh, could you imagine? All right. Well, so it just helps because that is also a sprawling environment. I mean, at the time of the the last game, like that was also a very relatively wide open kind of more sprawling area than we were used to. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, I think those locomotion options helped equally as well there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think it felt as large this time also because there wasn't I don't want to spoil things, but it's a different type of gameplay, right? When you're in Yokohama, it's more spread out in terms of like there's something important to the story over there at the end of the map, and on the other end there's a little bit of something as well. But you don't. It's not filled with challenges. It's not filled with side stories as well, which happens more in Hawaii. So it's probably feels that you can get around faster without getting sidetracked by things in Yokohama this time. But it was impressive as well. Like last time, Yokohama was really impressive coming from Kamurocho or other places. Yeah. So Hawaii, a good choice, I think. Do you think they'll stick to like Japan next time? It's hard to tell, right?
Yeah, I mean, economically, from a game development standpoint, I mean, it would certainly be easier for them to reuse parts of that environment for the next game. But who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. Okay. So setting, I think, was a good choice, and it really comes alive. The way they do things, like the way that RGG Studio usually depicts a place. With the way it really works with Hawaii, with Honolulu, right? And you have the beach and the Aloha Links thing where you can just say aloha, hi, and make friends. There are so many NPCs in this game, right? It's like the streets are filled with people. There are shopping malls. There's a beach. Yeah, you can swim. There's a lot of stuff that you can do in this game. Okay, and so that takes us to gameplay mechanics. I think we've been talking a little bit about them in a way. So I don't know who wants to go first. Is there a particular thing about this game in terms of mechanics that you really enjoyed? Or anything that you really didn't like?
If there's anything I disliked, I think that the turn-based stuff it felt like a natural progression in terms of the improvements they made, and it slotted in really nicely. Obviously, later on you get sort of better moves, better powers, and there's certain ones that give you a bit more freedom. I won't spoil who does what, but that felt really natural. I think the mini games were genius. For example, what's the name of the delivery game? Crazy Delivery.
Yeah.
I got hooked on that like fairly early on, and actually as well, it was also coincided to be a reasonably decent way to earn money quite quickly. But I got hooked on that. I'd spend hours just running around delivering food to people and pulling off all sorts of crazy moves on a bike. It was just good fun. I don't know what it was. It just naturally felt good, just good fun. You don't realize the hours you're putting into it from my perspective, which was really cool. Obviously, you have the arcade games, which you can go and play. You've got golf. I loved the beach, and actually what I don't think gets a lot of credit in RGG games is sort of the setting of like the scenery in terms of looking over the beach, the sun setting. It felt really atmospheric.
It was amazing.
And yeah. I think actually it's probably the best game they've had in doing something like that in terms of setting a tone of atmosphere, which isn't, I know it's not a mechanic, but it contributes to the overall feel of it. A lot of it's very familiar. I think that makes absolute sense from a game development perspective. They're not going to reinvent the wheel, but what they improved, they did quite well. And what they added in terms of Sujimon, in terms of Non-Nanba Island, for example, which again, I got hooked on that as well. It was just good fun. And it is one of those games that if you want to drive the story, you absolutely can. But I think you'd lose a lot if you just did that, and actually getting distracted by the side stuff felt quite natural. And I think the way that they communicated the difficulty progression with the story was better this time around as well. I remember in Yakuza Like a Dragon, there was quite a spike about 2/3 of the way through. You'd end up fighting and they'd be like 15 levels above you. This time around, they handled that a lot better, and it felt a lot more natural just to be leveling up as you went. So you had your dungeons, you had obviously the random street fights as well, and any sort of boosters that you could get. So I think they corrected some of the issues from 7 from that perspective as well.
For sure, yeah. A question that I had for you guys, I should have researched this beforehand, but there's something in this game that I don't remember in the previous one. If you find at some point you keep leveling up, and if the enemies you find in random street battles are like really under your level, you can press, I think it's the left trigger, and just automatically win the battle. Like Ichiban or Kiryu just kicks the crap out of the guys, and automatically you win the battle. Did this happen in 7? I don't remember it.
No,
I don't believe so.
Right?
No.
And I think it was a welcome improvement from... I'm thinking about this from a person who's not a big fan of turn-based RPG games. People who are used to and love those kinds of games are used to and probably love grinding, which is not really my thing. I'm more of an action RPG kind of guy. And the fact that you really do have, even in this game, in Infinite Wealth, you really do have to somewhat grind to level up, right? Because the enemies get progressively harder, and if you don't level up your party, it'll be difficult for you to even progress through the story. But the fact that when you find enemies that are under your level and you can automatically just win the battle, saving time, and you could just keep going and do this several times and keep leveling up as well. That way, I think it's a good way for people like me to not get bored and not get like, bored is actually the right term here, because that's my problem. I get impatient, I get bored because I have to fight these enemies over and over again. I can't move from one street to the other without fighting 3 or 4 or 5 groups of enemies. And this made it really much or less of a grind, if you will. Even if it's grinding, it felt like less of a grind. And I don't think this was in the previous game either. It's a welcome addition from my perspective, at least.
Definitely for me as well.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of design choices that RGG made that kind of helped this be a game that can cater to almost any sensibility for how you want to approach it. And so for the people who do want to grind and do want that extra, min-max all of the character jobs and their equipment and everything, and you have extra dungeons that you can spend time doing the extra difficult ones, and then but nobody ever has to touch that stuff. And then at the same time, if you just want to play arcade games or do there, you can get by enough, as Matt was saying, without grinding to the extent that you had to probably in the last game. That really, if you were just approaching this from the standpoint that you wanted to vibe in Hawaii and just kind of take things as they come, but not approach it from a hardcore RPG perspective or do any sort of like min-maxing, you could do just fine. And I do think that it's it kind of commends that it was able to do that through all its ambition, for sure.
I did do things in this game that I found hard to do in the previous one, like the dungeons, the extra dungeons. I did those because I think they were much more enjoyable than the sewers in Yokohama in 7. You could do them like there were different levels, like each level had like 10 not levels. So 10
Floors,
levels
yeah.
in each sector, right? Like 3 or 4 sectors
yeah.
for each dungeon. And then you had like a mid-level boss and then a final boss for each sector. You unlocked more powerful gear. You had to rescue like hostages in both dungeons. And actually, after you finish the game, there's an extra, more difficult dungeon that you can unlock in like the premium adventure mode. But that's something to talk about later, maybe. But I found the dungeons to be, again, maybe more accessible as well for a person like me who's not really that good of a turn-based RPG player. I can't remember what they call it. Is it beatdown? Like the thing that happens when you can press.
Oh, the streamlining.
Yeah, the streamlining. I think it's beatdown or something like that. You can do that if you're actually over leveled. You can do that in the dungeons as well. That happened with me in a couple of sectors, so that made it easier to get through those as well. So all around, a more streamlined, battle mechanic, and the fact that you can actually move a little bit more freely this time, right? Have like depending on the job and depending on the situation, if you have like a bigger radius of movement. You can combo with other characters more easily if you level up your bonds. So that also contributed to improving the experience and making it more accessible to people who are not big on turn-based RPGs, I think.
Yeah, but even for those who are, I mean, that is honestly, that's the hook. I mean, the way in that they give you almost infinite possibilities to strategize through the way your area attacks work with different moves, or exactly, as you're building bonds through drink links, and you have different combos you can do with other characters as you advance other parts of the game. It just gives you a level of depth that you can explore that's there if you want it. And of course, the way all the elements work and how you can carry over some abilities from different classes as you level up through different classes. You can bring them to whatever you change your job to, and it just really lets you it gives players such agency to build their team in a way that really suits their play style and their interest in how to strategize. And I just absolutely love the level of depth that opened up. For sure.
Yeah, for sure. Excellent. Okay, anything you were not a fan of in this department of like mechanics and specifically?
Minor gripe later on in the story. If you're leveled quite highly, you obviously pick up other characters as you go. Again, won't say who, but they were quite significantly below the rest of the party, which is a little bit infuriating when you've spent your time leveling up your party and they're, say, 10 levels below, which then impacts your ability in terms of the overall fighting, which you have to just think a bit more carefully around how you approach those higher level battles with a character that's severely underleveled. Now, they do catch up in time, but that was a minor gripe that springs to mind straight away.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, that's just one character, I think, because all the other characters join your party at an earlier stage. I think the last one that you get, I think, is the one that you feel the difference.
Yeah, it probably happens at different points whenever you have like a Chitose, and then later on you would have. So I think it maybe is a recurring thing to some extent.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I mentioned the last one because that's the one that I felt the difference, right? Maybe I was I was leveled up higher than the game expected me to be, perhaps. Maybe that's the thing. And that's what happened to you as well, Matt. You were at a higher level than expected.
And that comes, I think, from getting distracted with side quests and other bits and pieces as well, which the game, I think, actively encourages you to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you, like I say, you end up getting distracted by these things just by virtue of oh, that looks shiny, and then away you go on a random side quest for 4 hours, and then you forget what part of the story you're in. But that's the beauty of it, and that's part of the reason I think it's much more natural this time around when you are leveling up. It is a minor gripe, and like you say, Casey, I think that the last character at the end, especially when they've got some quite powerful moves, when they're leveled up with everybody else, it's just a little bit frustrating. But it's a minor thing that I wouldn't cry over too much.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Did you guys? We won't spoil all the jobs, so people can go in relatively blind in terms of the classes or jobs, like they're called in this game. Did you try out a lot of them? Did you stick to the like? There was one character that I didn't do anything with, but which was Kiryu, because I can probably guess. It didn't felt right. But I know actually I'm lying. I actually did something different. I think I was like one of the jobs that came from the previous game, like breakdancer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I think I did that. I think I at one point I had all my party like breakdancing just for laughs. And that's what I did with Kiryu. But other than that, he was like Dragon of the Jima all the way, because it just didn't felt right. Yeah. But did you guys experiment with a lot of jobs, or?
I dabbled, but I was more interested in the mini games, so I didn't mess around with the jobs too much. It was very much like Yakuza Like a Dragon. I messed around with them, but I wasn't that bothered about leveling them up too much. I was quite happy with what I had from the start, and then just got lost in the other stuff.
Yeah.
I loved them, and I love the new jobs. And in fact, I kind of didn't even spend as much time with the original ones, just because I remember those, fondly enough from the previous game. But I think the newer jobs just took some swings to be really interesting, and also like introduce some really unique ways to approach battles, as far as how you deal elemental and AoE damage, or how you can heal, and it seemed like each class had some good healing aspects as well. I used the barbecue quite a bit. And so I loved mixing and matching those skills that you'd accumulate through each job. But ultimately, I kind of went with the vibe of what the characters like. What suits their personality, right? I think I actually ended up having Kiryu be like the desperado, or the sharpshooter, and then Chitose, I think she was a ninja for a while, but I think the fun was just mixing and matching, because it also gave you new ways. If you had been doing a lot of fights and you were getting a little bored of whatever strategies you were using, you could completely mix them up by making Adachi a football player or whatever. And so I just loved the possibilities that afforded. So and I think with the new plus, because I haven't like restarted the game and tried to new game plus, but I'll definitely lean into that even further. And because I absolutely love that aspect of it.
Yeah. I think I dabbled with that more in 7 than this one. But this one, I think when you can unlock different jobs, I tried maybe 1 or 2 per character, and then stuck with the one that I thought was more appropriate for that. I also agree with Ryan. It's like, which job suits the vibe of this character a little bit more. So I think I ended up, apart from Kiryu, everyone tried 1 or 2 different jobs, and apart from maybe 1 or 2 characters that joined the party later on, which I didn't really bother with them, with changing their jobs. But like Chichozi, I think was at the end was like a kunoichi, like the ninja.
Yeah,
right?
That's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
Tomizawa was like the pyro dancer or whatever it was, like the guy with the X. So yeah, the new jobs were actually pretty good. Yeah, I went back to hero with Ichiban, with Kasuga in the end. He was like a surfer, not a surfer, but the one that
the scuba diver,
Aquanaut
whatever.
or something.
Aquanaut, yeah, that's right.
Aquanaut, I think. He was that for a long time, but then closer to like the second third of the game, I went back to hero and leveled up the hero job. But the fact that you can actually transfer skills from different jobs to the one that you're using now, especially if you level up the bonds with other characters, that's a very good mechanic to help you get things from the jobs, get the favorite skills from the different jobs that you tried, and actually have a very good set of skills that help you in battle. Yeah, like the barbecue stuff to heal is useful.
It's fantastic because I mean it allows you to do exactly like make everybody a breaker and maybe an idol, or make everybody hula dancers or the pyro dancer, whatever. Either way, you could subsidize the lack of or the disadvantages that we're going to be, or mitigate the disadvantages that having everybody in the same job would otherwise incur, just by helping fill the gaps with the abilities you can carry over, and that's where you can have retain your elemental and healing and support. Strategy.
Because I feel like not being too much of a connoisseur of turn-based RPGs, I feel like whenever I see people talking about this, they talk about like building your perfect party and having like a support character, an attack character, and whatever, a magic character and stuff. And so this kind of throws that all that away if you want to. If you don't want to, if you want to keep doing what you've always done with these kinds of games, you can just have a party like that, or you can actually, like you said, have everyone be the same thing, and then just like pick skills from other jobs and improving them. So it's nice.
And that's the magic in the system, isn't it? Which is why I think this game can appeal to so many people. Because if you just want to keep it simple, keep it basic, keep your party as essentially the default, you can do that. The game doesn't punish you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And likewise, you're not overpowered if you do that. It's that for somebody new to the franchise or new to this type of game, that's a perfect entry point for somebody, especially for somebody, again, like me, who doesn't really play turn-based stuff, doesn't get into all of that. It's perfect for somebody like me to just get in, enjoy the mechanics, get involved with them if I want to, but not be punished if I don't. Whereas I think some sort of turn-based RPGs can do, but the Infinite Wealth doesn't, and actually allows you the freedom if you want it and gives you that element of control I think other games don't.
For sure. Side point, I think from my experience, we're seeing Sega/Atlas making turn-based RPGs accessible to more people with time. I think starting with like Persona 5, which I actually played after playing Like a Dragon 7. But so I played Like a Dragon 7, then I played Persona 5 Royal, and then this one. And it's getting progressively, I feel, better, more accessible. Not that it's simpler, it's as intricate as it can be. It's like an intricate system. You have a lot of detail, but you can choose not to go into that detail, into that level of detail, and you can still play the game and enjoy yourself if you want to. So I think it's like a nice thing that they're doing, opening this genre up to more people, which I believe is intentional.
Totally.
Yeah, and it's. I think you can tell by the reaction to it, not just Like a Dragon, but also the Persona series as well, which I think has got much more mainline or mainstream attention over the last couple of years as well, and I think that's reflected in the changes they're making to these sorts of games. It's very clever, very, very clever.
Yeah, for sure.
And I, at the risk of heresy, I will say that I think that's something I appreciate about the direction they're taking this game and what they've done with the, having its turn-based system operate on so many levels, that I just don't think through however many refinements of the brawler system that they had, they were quite able to achieve in the same way. And I'm just thinking of, anecdotally of my fiance, who, she always loved watching me play through those games and following the story and the melodramatic crime drama there, and over the top events that unfolded. And but at the same time, she was like, I'm not very interested in playing it because I just frankly don't find the beat 'em up style gameplay that interesting. And so as they make it so versatile, I think they really are doing a good job kind of opening it up to everybody, with while also giving those people who've loved the brawler combat some on ramps to continue to enjoy the combat system, even if they didn't traditionally like, or they don't traditionally like turn-based stuff. So yeah, they're threading that needle way better than I ever expected RGG
For sure.
to do.
For sure. I wonder if we're like a dragon is turning into a turn-based RPG and sticking to that, and we'll see part of RGG move on to something like Streets of Rage for a more brawler mechanic title. Because we're getting a new Streets of Rage, 3D Streets of Rage, right? And I think 3D Streets of Rage with built upon the basis of like the Yakuza games, the Like a Dragon games, the brawler games would be interesting, right? If they just can just take the what they did with the previous games and build upon it and adjust it and adapt it to the Streets of Rage reality, I think it would be a good thing. I wonder if that's part of the reason, or I don't know.
Maybe. I also wonder what they're doing with the Judgment series, because obviously that's still a brawler by all accounts. Yeah. And there was the fallout a few years ago with the main actor over in Japan, wasn't there? That his likeness wasn't going to be used because they were releasing it on Steam. I can't remember the exact details of it, but I presume that was sorted out. And the series was in limbo for a while after the second game. So they've got that to lean into if they want to go down a brawler as well. Like you say, Streets of Rage is a natural avenue for something like that. I could also hope they pick up a certain franchise that's right behind me right now, potentially, and go down the brawler route with that. But that would require, I think, a lot of arm twisting at Sega. But there's plenty of avenues for RGG, I think, to pick up that brawler side of things. And the brawler style is difficult as well, because you don't want to overcomplicate it and keep refining, because actually you then end up in a situation, and to pick on Shenmue, the Virtua Fighter engine, while it's very good, is very hard to master, and you don't want to go too far that way because you'll put people off. So it's a fine balance, I think.
For sure. But yeah, so I think they did a good job. I think I wasn't concerned because of the previous game, because of 7. I think they did a good job with that. I was just curious in how they would bring Kiryu into this style, and they did a pretty good job in like balancing things out. And even if Kiryu was part of like the turn-based party, the mechanics were the same in a way, but it felt like Kiryu, right? That was my main curiosity coming in. How will they make you like wait when Kiryu's like head-on guy, like faces everything and everyone head-on? But I think they did a good job in explaining it and adapting to it. And as you progress, you can unlock things that make it even more feel more like the traditional style of fighting for Kiryu than
it's
just
very
a
clever
system. Yeah,
very, very clever. I think the story lends itself to that a little bit. Obviously not going to go into spoiler territory here, but the story lends itself to Kiryu almost taking a bit of a back step. But when you do use him, obviously you get the use of the heat actions every now and again, which I don't know, they couldn't have done a better job in fitting in his sort of brawler-esque style within a turn-based system and giving you those extra options, giving you that heat action when it pops up now and again. It still felt like him, but felt like almost like an evolution with the character in the game and the story at that point, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we're aching to get into the story, but let's just go into other stuff before that. So side stuff, side things, side stories, side mini games, and I can't call Dondoko Island a mini game. It's a game within a game, right? Even even the Sujimon stuff this time is a game within a game, and they took it. Actually, let's go with that. The Sujimon stuff, they took it to another level. If it made me laugh hard back in 7 with like the Pokemon references and parodies, this time they just took it to a whole different level. Like you had gyms in a way, you had like the Elite Four, but not really. You had like a tournament, a league. So you could do a lot of stuff here. But what did you guys enjoy the most out of all of these side things that you could get lost in?
I mean, for me, Dondoko Island was I probably put at least a dozen hours into it, and building and then rebuilding my island to get it to be the perfect paradise that I would envision, and or a mini Kamurocho. So I think that's probably my favorite. We can probably get into that.
Yeah, sure.
I assume.
No, you can do it. You can do it now. Yeah, feel free to.
Yeah. No, I would go ahead, man. You're not gonna. It would just take up the rest of the podcast. And,
it's a sort of a rabbit hole in itself, Dondoko Island, isn't it? I must have put at least 10 hours into it, because obviously it actually happens at a point in the game. You think, what's going on here? Because I'd heard a lot about it sort of online, and people had been playing it and raving about it. So I was quite looking forward to getting to it. But it hooks you somehow. There's something very therapeutic about going around and beating up rocks with a baseball bat. Oddly.
That's true.
and building up your paradise, building up your island, clearing rubbish, expanding it out. I just got hooked on it. And then obviously you can use your Sujimon as well as part of, they do jobs for you and you get more resources, more money. You could easily spend 20, 30 hours in that if you wanted to. And I swear I saw someone online was earning like $20,000 per 3 days on that thing, which is insane.
Oh yeah. I think I got up to like 37. If you max out all of the DLC characters and the top tier, family of Yakuza familiars, they will give you lots of money every stay, and it is kind of ridiculous. And that was like, I think after I did that a few times, I was like, oh, I think this is generating an imbalance that the game is maybe not meant for where I'm at in the story. Maybe I should hold off until, but I didn't hold off. I just stayed there, let Chitose do their thing. I said, keep editing, it's fine. We'll meet up in a few years when after I've finished lived out my retirement
in like
on the Doko Island. One sitting. Oh yeah. I didn't go back to Yokohama the second that was introduced until I like completely maxed out everything and had the perfect island that I was happy with. And I said a dozen hours, but I think it was more like 2 dozen. I played. The game became Doko Island for me at that point.
And it did for me as well. I just completely and utterly abandoned the whole story, side quests a lot, and just played that for a good 10 hours and don't regret a second of it at all.
Okay. No, I actually went back and forth, and because as you progress through the story, you unlock stuff for Dodoko Island as well.
It's probably the healthier way to do it. Certainly you get more blueprints through the shops and
more characters to visit the island and like guests, and I felt like I was at some point I felt like a little bit tired of Dondoko Island, so I went back to Hawaii, did some stuff, and then when I unlocked a certain character from a story point that you meet someone and that character becomes available to Dondoku Island, I remembered, oh yeah, I should go back to Dondoku Island, and then I spent a few more hours there, and I came back again. So I never felt like I don't think I've leveled up everything either. I don't think I've put as much time into it as you guys did. But I certainly enjoyed my time there a lot. And a bit like in the game, you think you know everything that's going to happen. You just keep upgrading your island and unlocking new areas, but then you discover a new mechanic, like what Matt was saying. The Sujimon can be used to gather resources and build stuff and make more money. And that's like a whole new kind of gameplay in that mini game. So it's like a mini game in a mini game.
Yeah, with its own progression systems that feed into larger progression systems.
Yeah,
it's wild and super thoughtful. Like, I just don't know. I'd love to be a fly on the wall of the meetings that RGG would have gone through to kind of work through that progression of systems that they wanted the player to engage with to fill out that experience. Because it's impressive. It's super impressive.
Yeah, for sure. So Dondoku Island, go play it. Go lose yourself in that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll see you next year.
Be on island time. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fun because, like, especially if you did it in one sitting, the point in the game where that happens, it's like Shitoshi is editing a video, and okay, I'll edit the video, yeah, and when you come back, the video is done, and you're like, yeah, sure, I'll just spend like a year on the island and come back to see if you've edited the video yet or not. Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, just personally, I think it worked out so well because it happened. I got to Dondoku Island around the time that Katie had left for England. And so I was not able to go until like a couple of weeks later, and I had to settle to get our dog over there. So for that 2 weeks, it made sense because like I wanted to do all the Dondoku Island stuff. She had a lot less interest in it, and so it just worked out perfectly. The timing of me just playing nothing but that, and then we'd pick up on the story together once I got over there. So yeah, worked really well.
Okay, what about the other stuff? Maybe, I don't know, what else? Not to the level of Dondoku Island, I'm sure, but did you enjoy yourself or yourselves in any other part of the side stuff?
I'm going to say Memoirs of a Dragon. They were perfectly, as somebody who's played all the games back from the PlayStation 2 all the way through, and obviously played Gaiden, and the ending to that, which really does punch you in the feels, that ending. It's probably one of the best endings to a game I think I've ever played, and that's really high praise for something like that. And to lean into that, but also lean into Kiryu's past and the things that you've gone through on the way. It felt really emotive to go through that. I was really, really invested in doing that, and I spent a lot of time doing that with Kiryu as well, and just reliving the whole series in one game was masterfully done, really well told, and as I said, very, very emotive considering the storyline with Kiryu at that point in time as well. It just resonated quite a lot. Yeah, superb.
For sure. Yeah, same here. Yeah, that was definitely. And again, like, I wasn't expecting that to happen, like the game. And again, we're getting into story territory, so we'll leave that until a little bit later. But the way the story progresses, things change in where you are in the game or in the game world. You change. Some characters are in Hawaii, some are in Japan, and that makes the game branch out, makes the gameplay branch out, makes the story branch out, and gives Kiryu more time to shine and gets you. If you're a huge fan of the series, it's perfect fan service. I think the Memoirs of a Dragon side of it and the awakening thing, right? You unlock abilities, you unlock things that we'll talk about later, but it's a perfect way to wrap things up, right? And coming from Gaiden, it feels like that, like a big goodbye to a character who you've known and loved for so long, and meeting. I shouldn't say this yet. No, okay. Yeah, I like this. I like this. I like this. Spoilers later.
Yeah.
What about you, Brian?
I gotta admit, I felt just a little emotionally manipulated through some of those scenes. It was just like, man, what can you do? This is, bringing it all back. But what I appreciated most is that it, as fan servicey as it was, which to me, I'm generally put off of that or off by that in games if they aren't in service of something else or something more interesting. And here, I think they just did a fantastic job, not only like tying bows on some of those stories or those loose threads, but giving us a little more to move them forward. And I just really, or like tell us like more about how the characters are faring today and what they're up to and what their hopes and dreams are, and how each one kind of includes how the element of how Kiryu impacted their lives in some way going forward. And yeah, it was just a really interesting narrative device that I think they was very welcome to this, especially because the stakes of it, I guess as a whole, they kind of fed into the broader narrative that Kiryu was dealing with, which we will get into when we get into spoilers. And yeah, I think it was just really well done as far as actually advancing parts of the main story, or at least adding emotional weight behind it. So yeah, I absolutely loved that.
And completely optional, at least not completely, but for the most part optional as well. So if you don't want to get into this, but you definitely should, but you don't really need to. Some of them are like automatically you get into them as the story progresses, but most of it's just optional. So if it's not it's not like it's not shoved into your face like fan service here, enjoy this. No, you can skip it, you can get around it if you want to.
Just let Date drink alone in that bar and it's fine.
It's still there.
And he will.
Well, again, that's such a great point. And so much of the things that you can find compelling about this are not obligatory. And I, even Katie, not having played all of the previous games, wasn't necessarily familiar with most of the characters. She enjoyed them and she was like, yeah, I'm glad we did them. But like, I could have skipped them and probably didn't feel like it would have impacted my experience either way. And so I just love that stuff is there if you want it, but yeah, it's not required reading, I suppose.
For sure.
I love it.
Yeah. And then if you want to talk about like side stuff, you also have all the mini games and then some, right? And we talked about, Matt, you mentioned the Crazy Delivery mini game as well. I spent a lot of time on that. I went back to the can collecting mini game again that returned from 7. I don't know why I love that game so much. Like, so simple. The map is so small, but I have a blast every time I play that for some reason. Also worth mentioning, by the way, is that all of these side modes and mini games, they usually let you unlock stuff. Whether it's like blueprints for Dundoku Island, whether it's like soundtracks from other Sega games that you can listen to in the bar, or weapons or like equipment. So you usually get points. If you play the Crazy Delivery game, you get points, and those points can be used to unlock stuff and buy stuff. So it's a very intricate and detailed system that, again, is mostly completely optional, but it's definitely worth it if you want to unlock stuff and improve your experience as well. So definitely interesting. I enjoyed what I usually do in all of these games that have the mini game, darts. Had a blast with darts. Going back to Shenmue, that got me hooked on darts. So whenever there are darts in a game, I really enjoy them. Other than that, I haven't touched Mahjong yet. So one day, maybe.
I didn't either. I didn't, oddly.
One day.
Sicko Snap, that was funny.
Oh, yeah.
Pokemon Snap inspired. That is really funny.
Yeah. Okay. That's a highlight as well. Because we all need people to snap photos of sickos along the tram line. Yeah. Anything else worth mentioning in terms of? By the way, the sub stories or side. I don't know, Brian, if you wanted to mention anything else before that.
Yeah, I guess the sub stories is probably a good segue into the main. Because that at that point, I think it becomes a free for all for.
Yeah,
spoilers,
for sure.
maybe, but just for the standalone mini games. I mean, I don't know if there were any lowlights, but I didn't realize how much I didn't like Spike Out. Like, I just don't like that game at all. I loved it. So I loved the mechanics and the charging for different abilities. So it's a beat 'em up that was developed by Toshihiro Nagoshi's team way back in the early 2000s. And so I think it works probably. It was probably a fine arcade beat 'em up at the time. It was no Dynamite Cop, but that's what is really. No, I just felt a sense of it. Just felt like a chore, kind of playing that for a straight hour. Not that the play was bad or that I loved the individual pieces of it, and I just couldn't stand the lack of variation and just the kind of the forced repetition through that. Which what I will say though is I think that combat system is very well suited for being, a combat system in an RPG like Rent a Hero #1. I think it worked really well there. So if nothing else, I appreciated that it kind of gave a beat 'em up itch to scratch for those who wanted it in the game. That was otherwise
That's a good point.
Turn-based combat, and it was a nice little just nugget of a nod to some of the past works that the team was involved with. So I'm glad it was there. And then the others, Sega Bass Fishing was fun because I'd never played the arcade version and I didn't realize how differently balanced it was from the Dreamcast one. And so the line would build tension faster and it would break quicker and fish would get away easier. And it was definitely had more of the trappings of an arcade design that was that was intended for you to just keep shoving yen in there. And Virtua Fighter 3 TB I think is a game that I have given it a reevaluation over the last few years. That I actually think it's a fantastic Virtua Fighter game, even if it's not necessarily 2 or 4. I think it's I had a great time playing through that. So I think the arcade game selection in this one was pretty solid. I don't know what you all thought of it.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I'm saying Bass Fishing. I actually got hooked on that, ironically. No pun intended, but that was, there we go. That was good fun because I haven't played that since the Dreamcast days, for example, which is quite a nice sort of hark back to that. Spike Out is Spike Out. almost reminded me of a Streets of Rage, that what could have been back then in some respects. But that, yeah, is a beat 'em up pitch there, and obviously Virtua Fighter 3, which I think now, as you said, doesn't it gets more of a, I think it get a better rep now than it did back when it came out, certainly on the Dreamcast version, for example. But it is a perfectly serviceable, good fighting game that actually the version in Like a Dragon is very well done, and they just need to release a Model 3 collection right now and take my money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think it speaks volume of the content in this game when we, thanks to Brian, we didn't, but we were almost skipping over the arcade games. They are amazing in this one, right? So Bass Fishing, Spike Out, Virtua Fighter 3 TB. It's amazing that we have these games like in a way preserved, and we can play them, the arcade versions of these, and in a way easily sort of accessible for people these days to play again. But it actually speaks volumes of how much content you get in this game. That, for example, I didn't spend as much time in the arcades this time in this game when compared to previous games, right? Even Gaiden, I spent a lot of time with Daytona 2, but I mean, of course, it's Daytona 2, but even then, I think the game had enough content to keep me occupied and happy and engaged that I just didn't feel the need to go into the arcade as often and let off some steam. Even the UFO catcher, which I usually get addicted to at some point in all Yakuza games, this time I think I played it once or twice, and then in the beginning, and then never went back. So, but yeah, but definitely great that we have these. It's sort of a staple of the series as well, right? Getting these arcade games and something that reminds us of again what Shenmue did back in the day with having amazing arcade classics available in the game world to enjoy, and it's good that it's here still, this tradition. Okay, so I wanted to briefly mention the side stories because I remember last time we talked about Gaiden, Brian, you didn't enjoy the sub stories or side stories or whatever they're called here as much. The way they were they were not as organically done as in previous games, I think, was the problem.
Yeah, I think there were a handful of memorable ones. The longer form ones were fantastic. I think it really was just the system or delivery mechanic in which we were assigned them that all went through. Oh shoot, I can't remember her name.
Oh yeah,
your handler in the game.
Everyone's favorite character in the game.
Yeah. Well, if she appears in another game, it'll solidify it. Where we'll
sort of disappointed she doesn't appear in this one, but okay.
Yeah.
Spoilers, but yeah.
Whatever. And also the whole carryover of the Kiryu secret agent.
Yeah.
Especially with the return of some of those characters and organizations that spawn that it seems like that would have been kind of a fun class to have if you
secret agent or something, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. A Daidoji agent or whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think it was just more about how the sub stories were assigned rather than integrated into the environment, and then a lot of the smaller ones just kind of felt like checklists, which I kind of turned me off of most games. I hate that when things are distilled into checklists, but that's or at least like forced, like that's the only way to engage with them, as opposed to just an optional way to find them. But anyway, sorry. Yeah. So
leading into that, how did you find the sub stories this time in Infinite Wealth?
Oh, I thought they were great. I think they were also varied enough in. I'm just also trying to delineate like what was a sub story versus just a mini game, right? As far as that Aloha links, right? Because there was, and everything in a way was a sub story. Like even the Sujimon was a huge sub story that was.
It started with
also
at
its own
least,
game.
right, a sub story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then kind
Or
of
led
wrapped back
into.
into it. Yeah, exactly. Some of them I maybe wasn't as much of a fan of. Like at the mall, there were a few there that were a little bit half baked, or just like the chase. Both chase sequences, right, where you're doing the filmmaking thing for
with the
the
trucks.
asshole director, you're just like putting you in danger at every turn, and like nobody learns any lessons from that. The actors who quit originally because he was putting them in, he was making them do reckless, life-threatening things for the perfect scene. Yeah, it's like, oh, they see Ichiban do it, and it's like, oh no, we want back in on this.
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
really? Is that what we're taking away? After all of the parade of trucks that you have to dive away from with all the explosions, it's like, holy shit. And then I did like though that like something like that might also be played back or feed into future sub stories later in the games with other characters that might tie in with some of the characters you interacted with. So I think they did a great job. They were well written, maybe not necessarily always the most fun to play through. It's probably my summary.
Yeah, I feel like again, I think it speaks of the quality of the content that you get. I don't feel like they were necessarily highlights for me. That said, some of them or most of the extra content is prefaced by a sub story or leads into a sub story. So in a way, they are highlights because of that. But the sub stories themselves, I feel like they were something that was there this time, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah,
because the whole game is so well done, well crafted, and the story is and everything that I don't think you really needed like the amount of sub stories that you had, like in maybe a game set in Yokohama or Kamurocho, with like every corner there was a new story and a new sub story, and like you went into an alley and there we go, another sub story begins. And so this was a little bit more tame in that way, but I appreciated that because it didn't really take away from the rest of the amazing game and content. Yeah. What about you, Matt? Thoughts?
I thought they were better integrated this time around. Certainly when we talk about Gaiden, which is, I appreciate it was also like a much smaller game. They sort of kicked that out in about a year, something like that. So I can understand that. I think as well, like when you think of sub stories, you think they also come up from the drink links as well. There's sub stories there, which as you go through that, you end up going through like individual characters' own trials and tribulations, and then you pick up their background a bit more. So that's all sort of interwoven in, which fits the main sort of narrative as well. I think they're very well done on the whole. There's the odd one that was a bit cut and pasty. I did like the one with the heavy metal guitarist. I think his name's Matthew, actually. It was quite funny. That was really quite cool. And there was one I didn't quite finish where a guy was looking for ice, which I didn't quite finish that one.
Oh, that was
really sweet. That was really
sweet.
And not just sweet. Yeah, just and
a little tragic, but yeah.
And you end up meeting people from the previous game as well. How you end up doing that is that's like a 4-step, probably 5-step sub story, perhaps.
I think I was on 3.
Probably
by memory.
Yeah, you end up meeting the like that the Yakuza that dressed up like babies from the previous game. And they're the ones who help you. It all makes sense in a way. Not really, but it does. I think.
And those underlying stories are quite cool. When you think of Survive, the barman there,
Yeah.
and the sort of the tension between him and one character, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in a minute. That's, if you've played the other games, you'll know what that is. But it's so expertly done that even somebody who hasn't played it can pick up and go, hang on, there's some history here, and then sort of want to dive into it. So I think it's not just the sort of the set sub stories that you find going around Hawaii, Japan. It's the other things that you come across within the main narrative, I think, are expertly put together as well. And that's something I think maybe previous games struggled with a little bit, but here they've got that balance, I think, almost spot on.
Great.
Yeah. I totally agree with all of that. I mean, I think there's certainly the ones that were contained in a way and focused and definitely had emotional stakes in the way that the Drink Link quest did, the Memoirs of a Dragon stories did. Those were all, most of them were very memorable, as were some of the ones you did find in the environment. And I think they, even if not all of them necessarily were bangers, they nevertheless, I was happy that they were there. I was happy for their role of just being other things to help distract me in a game that was filled with distractions, and I never felt obligated or like that. Even if one was kind of a little, there were a few that I looking back, I'm just like, I'm not sure if I liked where that one ultimately went. Or like their commentaries on sex work, or like some of the stuff was just a little bit whatever. But nevertheless, like, they don't necessarily detract from the emotional core of the game and have their own charms, even if they're not perfect. So, I think it was very well done overall.
Yeah. So some of them were really sweet. Yeah. Like even the one that Matt was saying, the quest for ice by a man, even if it ended tragically, it also ended in a sweet way, right? So it's always very emotional with these games. Like everything they do is very emotional, which is kind of interesting when you consider the crazy ass scenarios and and like the variety of characters and settings and whatever. But it's like they are really experts in crafting a really emotional storyline, even if for these sub stories some of them have really nice emotional a nice emotional core there. You can see
kind of
where they're coming from.
Sure.
Yeah, and a good payoff in the end. Yeah,
which is part and parcel with how the sub stories have always been done in this series. I think it's always been one of the strengths of each and every Yakuza game to a certain extent. And this was an interesting case, and I think Matt, you alluded to it, is that it just wasn't integral just because there was so much else going on. Infinite Wealth didn't lean on them for its emotional charge in the way that other previous games might have.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so I think it's time, guys. It's time. Oh, I just wanted to mention one thing briefly, very briefly, because it's in a way, not in a way. I think it is a meeting game. The matching, like the dating app.
Oh god. Hilarious.
I didn't finish it, but I assume it was always a bust, right? Everyone person, everyone. I played 5 or 6 of them, and like I don't know if there was like an ending, a true ending to that. I'll have to get back to that. But Brian's like,
talk about best characters in the game. The woman who invents that app,
Mismatch.
Mismatch. She is. I want to see her in every Yakuza game going forward. And the way she just busts Ichiban's balls is just so perfect, and is exactly what he needed after the shit he pulled with Saiko. But we'll get into that. It was actually nice for the player. Is kind of a little cathartic in a way. That mini game kind of played, and those events kind of played into like a lesson that he probably needed to hear or
Yeah.
learn.
Very much a character I think will come back in later games, even
Yeah.
without Ichiban. If that was the case, I think that's somebody you're going to see again.
Yeah. Okay.
You hear that, RGG? If anyone from RGG is listening, we definitely need more mismatch.
If awesome. Okay, so let's get into spoiler territory. So from this moment on, it's on, people. It's on. So it is like 90 minutes ish into this, and so it's. Let's talk about spoilers. Let's get into the story and stuff. I had in the outline I had characters and story, but I feel like it's the same thing in a way, right? We can't talk about characters without spoiling stuff. So
Yeah.
And talking about characters, so most of the characters, all of the characters from 7 return, all of the playable characters return. Yes, they do, even if later on, but they do return, because this time, as the story progresses, you start with one party, but then it branches out. There's a party that stays in Hawaii, and then another one with Kasuga, and another one that goes with Kiryu back to Yokohama. And then you have each of the dragons has its own his own party of characters, which include everyone from the previous game and 2 new characters, right? Just 2, Tomizawa and Chitose.
Yeah.
Right?
2 new
Everyone
full-time
else is
party members.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Full
Plus
time.
one that I
full-time.
wish was a party member. But
Yes. Okay. So, Brian, yeah. So let's start with you. Which characters or characters did you like the most this time?
I love them all. I think the new characters, Eric and Chitose, and we can talk about Yamai, but holy crap, I thought they added such fun elements to the party and to the narrative and to the chemistry between all the characters, and also highlighted a lot of Ichiban's sensibilities and his maybe aloofness and heart of gold, maybe to over trustingness to an extent.
Sure,
they especially at the beginning of the game when you're introduced to people like Eric, who is a cabbie that he takes a ride with from the airport, ends up trying to hold him up and rob him, and then Chitose, who actually does rob him and strip him naked, and leading to the events that we'd see at the E3 or whatever that trailer was, where he was naked on the beach in Honolulu. And then just kind of seeing how he gets to know them later on, and how that trust is built and how their dynamics, I guess the redemption arcs, their respective redemption arcs play out. I think the absolutely made the story 100% better for their presence. And then, of course, other characters that maybe started out even more sinister, like Yamai, and also ended up, I'm not sure how much we want to get into spoilers, but he ended up being one of my favorite.
I think we're good. It's 3 months after the game's release. So again, if you're still listening and you haven't played the game, what are you doing? Just go play the game and come back later. Come back next year to listen to this last part.
So yeah, I think in a nutshell, I think my favorite characters in the game were pretty much all the new ones, or a lot of the new ones.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Matt?
And my least favorite was still Nanba.
Yes.
I was going to ask that, but okay. I think are we all on the same page here?
Yeah, we're all on that one.
Okay. Still,
Team Non-Nanba.
Team Non-Nanba. Still less of a pain this time, less of a nuisance, I think. Mm-hmm. Much less. His sub story and the way that I'm glad they put him on Kiryu's side, or Kiryu's team, right? Because I think it showed a side of the character that we aren't really used to, like concerned and caring, and maybe that made me not find him so annoying as last time. But still, yeah, least favorite, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So Matt, what about you? Apart from Nanba.
Tomozawa, there's apart from Nanba. Tomozawa stood out as one for me. I really liked his redemption arc. When you think, obviously, he tried to hold up Ichiban early on in the game, and then sort of as you go through the drink links, you find out a little bit about his past. Obviously, as the story progresses, it turns out Yamai is essentially, well, he works for Yamai under basically force. He has to. He owes money, and he's very much had a long fall from grace, culminated in one of the sort of earlier boss fights, I guess, as well, with Dwight. So, and you see that sort of that point there where he gets his own redemption, where he doesn't off him, which I think a lot of people probably would at that point in time. But then you find out about his girlfriend or his ex-girlfriend at that point, and her life and how she's moved on, but actually he still cares for her, he still looked out for her. And that's quite sweet, actually, for something like that, considering he was set up, he had a massive fall from grace. And Ichiban brought out that side of him. And I mean, Ichiban's a lovable rogue. He's a bit of an idiot, but everybody likes him, and he's infectious, isn't he? I think it's probably the word. I don't know how, I don't know why, but you can't not like him, and that's very much. But that's very much in theme with the party and the people he picks up along the way. Chitose is really cool. Her and Tomozawa go back and forth like they're almost like brother and sister. Actually, the way they sniping at each other the entire time, but it's really funny. It's really quite comically done as well. Other sort of say side characters, other characters. Ebina, I wanted to kill him by the end of it. He had a face you really wanted to punch. And AG as well. Like he starts out helping you, and then obviously later on screws you over, and then there's a nice little redemption at the end. But when he screws you over, God, I wanted to punch him. Like he had that real nasty arrogance around him, which I thought was very well done and fitted into the narrative quite well. And I thought the overarching story, obviously early on, Ichiban's working, he loses his job, and then it's then foretold later on that actually this whole thing was a ruse. And that I liked how they lent into sort of modern culture as well with it's not YouTube, is it? I can't remember the exact channel that it's called.
Tatara channel.
You got the VTuber on there,
yeah,
sort of exploiting things that are a bit dodgy, and that very much leans into modern society as well, but it's done in it fits the narrative, it fits the story really, really well, and actually shows how things can be spun a certain way if you want them to be. And obviously, how can you not mention Kiryu? I avoided all spoilers beforehand. I don't know how, but obviously it was everywhere with trailers and things like that, and I refused to watch them out of principle because I didn't want any spoilers going in. So when I found out that Kiryu was potentially terminally ill, I was like, oh, that took me by surprise a little bit. Obviously, you end up in the end of Gaiden, he's got great hair, he's just arrived in Hawaii, so you think something's off. But actually, when they go into all of that, which then feeds into the Memoirs of a Dragon and him sort of getting deservedly time for himself, he's given so much to so many other people over a long period of time that actually he deserves that. And also, I think it's probably the first time that he actually recognizes that he needs help from people, because he's very much a bull in a china shop. He'll run in, smash everything up, and leave. But this time, as part of his character development, he has to lean on other people for potentially the first time and trust other people. And that bond him and Ichiban have by the end of that is really solidified and really, really well done. And the ending's left a little bit open, but I liked the way they ended it, in terms of when you've done the memoirs, you've seen some of the previous characters, and at the end where he comes, he's there, and Haruka's looking for him, and you just see the nameplate. Perfect.
Yeah. And the doctor asks for his name, and he's like,
yeah,
he says his name. So, and I think it's the name of the achievement or the trophy is like the man who regained his name or something.
That's it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I know this. I remember this because it was just yesterday. Yeah. Uh, I felt a little bit like Brian was saying. I felt manipulated at times because they were toying with my emotions through the whole game. I avoided, so these past 3 months I avoided everything that had to do with like I to be honest, I didn't really see much of a conversation about the story of the game. I saw people mentioning like Dondoku Island and memes and stuff about the game, but not really talking about the story.
Maybe that's because they all just got stranded on Dodoko Island.
Exactly.
No Matt and I did for a long time.
No one's finished the story yet. But I mean, knowing the series, knowing the character, I assumed there was always a point there would be a point in the game where in the story where something would happen and he would not die or something. But you were basically wrapping up Kiryu's storyline throughout this game, right? Everything, not just his storyline in this game, but his whole life, the story of his life, right? So, like Brian mentioned before, or Matt, I don't know, or maybe we all did the memoirs of a dragon thing with all the characters that were more important in previous games, even like some side characters that you've met before, like the pocket circuit fighter. Who else? Like the martial arts master that is in all the games and stuff like that. Those characters were all there. You met them, or Kiryu was able to see them from afar and listen to their voices or stuff. Even Haruka, he listened to her voice. So everything was wrapped up really nicely. And till the final moment in the game, I assumed, yeah, he's gonna die. So I feel like I was a bit manipulated by RGG, but I don't mind. I don't mind. As for characters, I agree with everything that you guys said, because you all talked about Chitose and Tomizawa already. I'm not gonna repeat what you guys said. I want to mention. I just forgot about his name. We just talked about him. Tomizawa's boss. Yamai.
Yeah.
So the story in this game, much like every other story in every other Like a Dragon game, is a bit unpredictable. There's a lot of like twists and turns. But I kind of assumed, since I'm an expert on this series by now, that Yamai would be like the final boss, like the big baddie at the end of everything when you first meet him and you have to fight him the first time, and you after that you have to fight him again and stuff. And the way they played that, and then at the end I actually ended up caring for the guy and feeling like, man, please let him come back in a future game. And I was actually thinking, oh, he's going to join the party at the end of the game or something. But no. But that's like a testament to RGG being RGG and doing a great job with the story and the characters and building these storylines and making you care for like these fictional characters that are like crazy, but have all this baggage from previous events in their lives and being wronged by other people in a position of power, and then like doing crazy stuff themselves and then like redeeming themselves at the end. So yeah, Yamai was definitely a highlight for me in terms of the non-playable characters. Dwight, yeah, he was a character there. He was a bad guy.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they knew what to do with him necessarily. And I felt that about a lot of the villains in particular. I mean, I guess as a a key to kind of slot into the I don't know, the what do you call it, the mix of different organizations and stuff that had control over Hawaii, and were looking for
Akane-san.
Kane. Yeah. And so it's like, oh, okay, that's just one of them, and he's kind of an asshole, and then he shows up on the ship later, and he's also kind of an asshole. And I don't think they really quite had a progression for him in the way that they did for Yamai. Although I loved, with Trejo's the voice actor, that was a lot of fun.
Did you play the? That's a good question that I should have asked earlier.
Did you play
in English? Yeah,
I did because. Yeah.
Sorry, Bat, you too? Did you play it in English?
Japanese.
Okay, Japanese here as well. Okay, this time. But yeah, Brian, please.
Yeah, so I did play this one in English. I mean, specifically because it was based in Hawaii, so I felt that was like kind of fitting for the setting. But also, I think that's just kind of the delineation I'm going to make for my first playthrough of every Ichiban involved game. Because I do think they have very strong English casts, and so if they're not necessarily fully centered on Kiryu, I'm going to probably listen to the English one first before I switch to Japanese on subsequent playthroughs. Whereas a Kiryu-driven game, especially one set in Japan, those ones all default to Japanese. That's kind of my policy.
I went with Japanese solely because of Kiryu. I think this time Kiryu's voice actor is much better than in the previous one. I think they changed the actor, but I just, after playing Gaiden, I just couldn't couldn't go back to an English voice actor for Kiryu. That said, maybe I'll play it in English again. The 7 I played in English.
Did Gaiden have English? I don't even know if I looked.
It got patched.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I played through it.
Even before. After, I think it got patched like a few days after we recorded our episode on it.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah. It took a while to get patched, but yeah.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So other than that, story-wise, my hot take is, and let me preface this by saying that I think the story is really well done, but like the whole like overarching reason for all of this to have happened kind of felt like a bit far-fetched. Yeah, which is weird for a weird thing to say for a Like a Dragon game. Everything is far-fetched, but not the most believable is not the word, but nothing is believable here. But it's not like the whole reason, like the motivation for the biggest baddies here, apart from like Bryce, the one from Hawaii, that made sense. The motivation and everything that made sense. Although, didn't he think the island would eventually run out of space for storing nuclear waste and stuff? Okay. Anyway, and everyone would get like seriously ill, including himself.
Do we want to like recap the overview of kind of what those dynamics were, or those events were?
Sure. Why not? Yeah.
And actually, by that I mean, do one of you want to do it? Because I don't remember them enough for me to.
So basically, by the way, let's start from Gaiden, right? So in Gaiden, we discover that Kiryu is alive and well. He had to make a deal with the Daidoji faction, and he had to pretend that he died. And in exchange for that, they would protect his family and friends, and he would have to work for them, right? But he couldn't have any contact with Haruka and all his friends and everyone from the Like a Dragon series, basically. In Gaiden, we discover that, and then at the end, he gets sent to Hawaii for a mission. in Infinite Wealth, we start off in Yokohama, which I thought was weird. I assumed the game would start with Kiryu in Hawaii because it was in the demo for Gaiden. But it started in Yokohama 1 year prior to the main story. Kasuga is the hero of Yokohama. Everyone loves him. He works at Hello Work, right?
Hello Work, yeah.
Hello Work helps former Yakuza find jobs and get their life on the straight and narrow. But then there's a video online on that Tatara channel exposing Kasuga and his friends as frauds, people who are trying to bring the Yakuza back together and restart the Yakuza after it all got disiluded in Like a Dragon 7. Am I doing well so far? Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is much more detail than and way further back than I expect you would start. But yeah, no, totally.
So 1 year later, Kasuga's really down on a really bad place, like with all his. He also proposes to Saiko because you mentioned that before, right? And
how
that
much do we want to talk about
wrong.
that versus block it from memory? Other than that, I kind of liked where they arrived with it and how it played into Saiko's, her drink link with Kiryu. And those events where it's like, oh, that's not the first. Ichiban's not the only dude who is, proposing
Interesting.
awkwardly.
Oh yeah,
but also just like, to her, it's like, well, what's important to me is very different than all of that, and it kind of really shedding light on just how much she values I don't know, people who respect her agency, and that's not what any of these dudes, including Ichiban, are doing when they're. But anyway, you can cut all of this because it's a non sequitur.
But that's the start of everything going wrong in Kasuga's life, right? I think that's before the Tatara channel video.
I think. Yeah, that's it.
And so that's actually a very everything goes wrong. Personal life, professional life, like in the eye of the public, he's a bad guy now. He's a fraud. 1 year later, he gets contacted by someone from his past, Sawashiro, his former Yakuza captain, and he tells him that his mother is alive and living in Hawaii, and asks him to go to Hawaii to find his mother. Turns out when he arrives in Hawaii, turns out that everyone who's a bad guy in Hawaii is looking for his mother as well, for reasons unknown. And that actually kicks off the story from there. He meets Tomizawa, who tries to rob him. He meets Chitose, who actually does strip him naked and leaves him drugged on the beach. He finds Kiryu, and then events unfold, right? So that's basically where the main story, the main game kicks off. I think that's where it actually gets started, because before that it's like a prelude of sorts, like an introduction. Like a tutorial of sorts as well.
Yeah,
you get to play a little bit like with the battle system and stuff, but it gets much more intricate after you reach Hawaii. And then it turns out that the main bad guy, there are two main bad guys, one in Japan and one in Hawaii. Turns out the Japan one is probably the baddest Betty. But that's where I was getting into. So he's actually Kasuga's half-brother. So Ebina, same father, different mother. And he hates the Yakuza because of what happened to him, to his mother. And he wants to basically kill every single Yakuza he can and make their lives miserable. Which is, I think, an interesting motivation, but the way he plays it is a little bit weird. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much
Yeah.
into this.
Yeah, and meanwhile, so I guess my kind of what what I was trying to allude to is there was just so much introduced as far as characters with their own motives for trying to find Akane and their own broad play and dynamics with Yakuza in general versus just wanting to make money. Maybe Palicana or ultimately like a Bryce might have been. But this was one area where I feel like maybe my fears of like a dragon's or sorry, Infinite Wealth's ambition maybe collapsing on itself a little bit is probably in that back end of the narrative where all of those organizations kind of went into play, especially when some of them they just kind of outright ignored or dropped at certain points or dropped and brought back in. And like that whole hidden shopping mall, for example, from I forget the organization name.
Yeah, the
Like
Barracudas, right?
Barracuda.
Yeah.
Barracudas, yeah, the that whole sequence, and they didn't really revisit that whole concept of the counterfeit underworld, which I think they just introduced a lot of threads that they weren't quite sure how to tie into the end game or the back end of that narrative. That maybe they'll revisit in the future, but yeah, this
Probably.
is very
Yeah.
interesting how many things are kind of left out there that were unexplored.
That's a good point. I was thinking that maybe it's so every single Yakuza family is done by the end of this game finally, right? So the Siryu clan was the last one standing in a way, and those are done as well by the end of this game. So maybe this is a way to set up future events of people that are coming after Casca and friends, like from these organizations in Hawaii. Maybe they get like established in Japan as well. I don't know. Things like that. Because it's happened before, right? Reusing these organizations to
Bleach Japan, yeah.
Bleach Japan.
Yeah, they came back.
Yeah.
Why? But okay. I just remember there was a character called Wong. He was the leader of one of those groups.
Like 5 minutes, yeah.
And I think he was becoming an interesting character. I assumed he would join the party or something, and then he gets killed off very quickly, which is kind of weird. But I think it sounds like I'm saying this is not a good story. It's not what I'm saying at all. It's just, and especially because the whole Kiryu thing and the bond between Kiryu and Kasuga, and like the thing that, like, just like Matt, you said, Kiryu starting to learn how to lean on people and realizing that he needs people and friends to accomplish his goals and help him along the way. That makes up for any plot holes or things in the story that don't go quite well as in previous ones. I just wanted to mention that it's probably the less cohesive story in recent memory for one of these games, I think, which still is not a bad thing in terms of the overall story is good. It's really enjoyable. It's really emotional. And you get to see Kiryu cry again, which is nice. By the end, he cries again. Not as much as in Gaiden, but yeah.
It wasn't quite the ugly cry.
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, that's my own take on it. So maybe you guys don't feel that way in terms of how they handled things. But again, pretty good story, I think. Pretty good and pretty enjoyable. I really want to I'm curious to see if they actually use these organizations in the future again. And there are some questions that are left unanswered right at the end. So, for example, what happened to the Daidoji faction? Why did they let Kiryu go? Let him regain his name at the end? will he survive? Probably, yeah.
I mean, they not being funny, they probably should let him have his time in the beach and obviously keep him alive. But I don't know. Kiryu's story just feels like it's finished now. It feels like it's done. He's got his name back. I don't think they need to revisit it, and I hope they don't shoehorn him in, if that makes sense. They did a little bit in 7. It felt like he sort of just appeared out of nowhere. Okay, the broader story made sense eventually, and Gaiden clears a lot of that up. But it just wouldn't surprise me if they can't quite let him go. And they probably should. For now.
For now. Yeah. I think I agree, right? I really like Kiryu as a character. But I think it's time. I really enjoy. By the way, one of my favorite moments in the game was when you get to have Kiryu not fight them, because that was a pain, but to have Kiryu alongside Majima, Saejima, and Daigo in the Millennium Tower in one of the last sequences in the game. Right, the 4 of them, like they're support characters. You just control Kiryu. That was awesome. That was like an epic moment. But I feel like maybe not just Kiryu, but all of these like legendary characters should appear less and less in the future, right? And let Kasuga have his time in the spotlight.
It felt like a passing of the torch, didn't it? That was the whole point. That Kiryu's, I'm trusting you to find this girl. I'm trusting you to look after Akane, and it would negate a lot of that if they just brought him back, like for an entire story. A little, cameo somewhere, yes, fine. But I think if they're going to move forward, I think it needs to be. They've established Ichiban as the successor, almost, haven't they?
They had already in 7, though. Not in this meaningful a way, but they had. I think they realized they needed Kiryu back in terms of like, I'm not going to say sales, but to make this more impactful and to bring new players to this new style of game. I think 7 was probably not as successful. I think it was pretty successful, but I think it alienated some of the like hardcore Yakuza fans, maybe, who were more into the brawler style of gameplay. And this was probably a way to bridge the gap. I don't know if it worked, but probably. That's what I think.
I think from sales-wise, I think it did. I think it's probably their most successful title in the Like a Dragon series off the bat, certainly from what was in the press, but I could be wrong.
This one, yeah, for sure. Yeah, this one they reached 1 million copies really quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the fastest selling for sure.
Yeah.
Especially in Western markets, which is a surprise.
Yeah.
Maybe not a surprise, that's kind of the trend. It's been the trend since 0, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if RGG just decided they had enough stories that they still wanted to tell with Kiryu, that maybe through the systems of the Memoirs of a Dragon and the like, that they figured they could kind of put a lot of those or consolidate them together in a narrative like this without drawing them out across a bunch of games, that maybe they can I don't know, have a fitting ending for Kiryu, that if they decide to not, that they don't feel obligated to have to shoehorn him in future games. So I'm really hoping, and I totally agree, I would love to play at least one mainline Yakuza game that really commits to the passing of the torch that they had. I thought that they had done with 7, but certainly with this one.
Yeah, for sure. And that there's a point in the, like, before you start the ending sequence, because again, they meet in Japan, and then again, they separate into 2 parties. One goes to Hawaii and another one stays in Japan. And at that point, there's a little like speech actually is a two-sided conversation. Kiryu asks Kasuga to think about the future, let him care about the past and deal with that. And Kasuga tells Kiryu not to let himself die without getting treated, right? And that's where the story goes in the end. But yeah, I agree with all that you guys have said. Hopefully, I wouldn't mind like the occasional Gaiden-esque game with Kiryu, right?
Yeah.
And even maybe a Gaiden-esque game with like what you said before, Brian. I was surprised we didn't get all the gadgets. Like one of the jobs could be like a Daidoji agent or something with all the gadgets that Kiryu had in Gaiden. Really surprised and disappointed a little bit. But maybe they could explore that a little bit, and maybe in his older age, he needs to use these mechanics as a way to help him and aid him in battle. But I think it's we're at a point in the story of Kiryu that I'm happy and satisfied, and it's okay if you let him go, if you let him rest. Finally.
Yeah, let him just enjoy the beach for a bit.
Yeah.
Send him to Dodoko Island. Just,
My version of Dondoko Island has a golden statue of Kiryu. They're welcoming people. So, yeah. Yeah, he would enjoy that. Probably not. Okay, so we're well into the 2-hour territory here. So before we wrap things up, I just wanted... We already mentioned this a little bit. What's next for Like a Dragon was like my final topic. So what do you realistically expect from the next game? Do you think it'll be another... Is it turn-based RPG all the way from here on out? Are we getting a brawler type game next? Is Q really dead? So realistically, we've talked about what we wanted to happen, but realistically, what will happen?
I know there's rumors, isn't there, that 3's getting the Kiwami treatment, which has been floating around the internet. So that could be a quick win, I guess, if they wanted to do something like that. I mean, I'd buy it because it's Yakuza Like a Dragon. I'd buy it and play it again for sure. I think outside of that, if you're going down with Ichiban, I think it will be turn-based going forward. They might, as you said, dabble with other bits in and around it, but I think the mainline games will be turn-based. I'd be interested to see where they take Ichiban in terms of his character development, because he's very much a lovable idiot. But at some point, I think they need to develop him a bit more in terms of... he cares for people, but there needs to be more around that, I think, and how they develop that. And obviously with Psycho as well, and his constant cock up with that, which was cringeworthy, but there we go. So I think that's where they'll take him at some point. And I do think that they will have people go after him off the back of the events of this game. And then they've obviously got the Judgment series, which could come back, and I'd like it to come back. I think I think there's the demand for that. Virtual Fighter 6, obviously they worked on Ultimate Showdown, and 6 is heavily rumored to be in development at the moment. I could see them working on that as well. And maybe a Shenmue game, considering the Shenmue podcast they did, which was very, very expertly done. But I think that's just pie in the sky, isn't it? I think you'll get Kiwami 3, some sort of Lost Judgment type game would be next, I think, after that. And then we'll get another Like a Dragon game if they don't do a smaller game in between to tide things over.
Yeah, I think that's about right. I really enjoyed, by the way, the Easter eggs. There was a Shinobi
they were really good
restaurant. There was talks of Game Gear and the battery life, and a lot of stuff like the Shenmue reference in the podcast as well. There was a lot of great Sega stuff that was referenced throughout the game. Even the Crazy Delivery game was like Crazy Taxi. So really nice. What about you, Brian? Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I maybe don't expect, but I will be thrilled if RGG continues to have the capacity to surprise us with whatever they do with the next one. I do agree that the next mainline Like a Dragon game is probably a ways off, and I think it ought to be. This was a lot. This is a fairly exhausting game and a comprehensive game, and it has so much to it that I would love to, for them to take their time and I'm fine with the next one being a slow burn if and when we get it, probably in a few years. But when it, either way, I would love to see it maybe do. Yeah, I mean, I honestly just want it to do things that I can't envision or anticipate for it. And I feel like this game did some of that. And one of the things that I loved about the series, even going back to like 4 and 5, is that it wasn't necessarily a passing of the torch, but maybe there's just a lot of different torches and there's a lot of stories to explore where you have multiple protagonists that you treat with the same level of care and focus as Kiryu, and you can, make the story equally about whether it's the returning characters that they've established over these last 2 games, give them more space and time to carry the narrative without putting it all on a single character. I think you're all right. Like Ichiban, we've seen him a lot in the last couple of games, and he is a very charismatic fool, and we love him. But I don't necessarily think the narrative is best served by focusing only on him and everybody else kind of being just cursory support party members. I mean, I would love to see the game really lean into giving new characters a chance to drive it forward and to help contribute to its identity. So that's probably more what I'd hope than rather what I'd expect. But yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, how many hidden, forgotten family members does Ichiban have at this moment, right? After dad, mom, step brother or half brother or whatever. So, I mean, yeah, probably not too many family members to come back for revenge or something. Yeah, I would love to see. I think I said this in a previous show. I would love to see what happened with. I guess now we know, sort of, but with Daigo and Majima and Sajima after the dissolution, right? They started like a security company or something.
Yeah.
And apparently that's done now. But maybe like a Sega bass fishing set in the north of Japan with the guys like fishing in the snow, in the ice or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, bring back Saijima's whole mountain hunting, bear fighting, bear fist fighting arc.
Yeah. Speaking of the bear, that's one of my Sujimon, like in my main party of Sujimon battles.
Oh, it's the best one. The highest HP and some of the strongest attacks. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Gotta have them.
Yeah. Also, if you play the game until the end and you start the premium adventure, not the new game plus, but the premium adventure, you can actually go back to Hawaii and Yokohama. You can switch between the two, and you can the characters can wear whatever you like in the world, not just in battle, but everywhere. So Kasuga's got the I love Psycho and I love Ichiban t-shirt in my game to remind me of...
Psycho appreciates that.
Yeah. To remind me of how Loverboy did with that. It's so good. Okay. So Matt and Brian, thank you very much for joining me. I think this was a very comprehensive look into the game without spoiling too much. I think people a a little bit, but not too much. Even for people who listen to this, I think they can still go into the game without knowing everything that happens. But I think it's got our seal of approval, right? So people should definitely play this game. Yeah. And so before we go, where can people find you, my friends? So let's start with Brian. Where can people find you? What have you been doing on the internets?
Nothing, not much on the internet. I've been busy moving and settling in and traveling in real life. But yeah, I guess I'm Jet Brian Radio on Twitter, and then I'm do stuff occasionally with the Dreamcast Junkyard. We have another podcast called the Titan Cast that was spawned from Saturn Junkyard people, and then what's the other thing? Oh, I have a blog that I haven't updated in a while, but I'm about to have a little more time that I'm going to try to focus on writing for it, and that's called thevirtuaplanet.com. And that's pretty much all I got. Yeah.
Awesome. Matt?
So I'm very lucky to co-own Shenmue Dojo with a friend of mine called James Brown, who has a residency, I think, on the Sega Lounge, Casey.
He'll be here next week.
But we have a Shenmue themed website, podcast, videos, you name it, we've got it. And we're campaigning at the moment to get the 4th Shenmue game with hashtag Let's Get Shenmue 4 on the 4th of every month on X, formerly known as Twitter. And you can find us on Twitter, Shenmue_Dojo, Facebook as Shenmue Dojo, YouTube, Shenmue Dojo VOD, and Twitch as Shenmue Dojo as well. We're pretty much everywhere on the internet these days.
That is quite true. Let's get Shenmue 4. Okay, very good. So as for myself, I'm here, the Sega Lounge, every week. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Next week, we'll be back with our live episode featuring the aforementioned James Brown and other guests. We'll talk about something, an interesting topic and cover the latest Sega news. And, play Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. It's a great game. So thank you very much, Brian and Matt. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Take care. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
Aloha.
Bon voyage.
Bon voyage.
Oh, wow.
Outside the police station. Bon voyage. Oh, dear.
The Sega Lounge, hosted by me, KC, and part of Radio Sega's network of live shows and podcasts. Theme song and incidental music by OSC. Got any suggestions? Drop me an email to podcast@thesegalounge.com. Find us at The Sega Lounge on X, Twitter, and Instagram, at thesegalounge.com on Blue Sky, and be sure to check out our Twitch and YouTube channel for live video content. You can find previous episodes of the show by going to thesegalounge.com, on the Terra Player app, and wherever you listen to podcasts. A Mixed On Productions podcast.